Dear panel, in my speech I'd like to first give some pieces of framing about this world, and then I'd like to introduce our first two arguments, one about the inclination to do good, and the second one about equality and less conflict. So first, some pieces of framing. So number one, what do we define as what is good and what is bad? So we follow Kant's philosophy on this, as this is the most accepted and reasonable one. So we consider good are actions that are considered moral and good under every circumstance. So for example, if you're lying to make someone feel better, that is still a bad action. But if you're helping someone cross the street, in every circumstance, that would be a good action. What do we think of bad actions? That is violating someone's freedom or their ability to make decisions, or violating their dignity. So number two, what kind of world do we want to achieve? What kind of world do we prefer? We prefer a world where happiness is maximized, as this is the main goal for most people in life, and where suffering is minimized. Number three, how does the karma system work? We think that notions of good and bad can be translated into notions of luck. So luck is when you're trying to do something, you're more likely to achieve it, you're more likely to be successful, you're more likely to encounter opportunities that help you with this, or you're just more likely to encounter good things in life. Not being lucky would be the opposite of this. So doing good things translate into more luck into your life, and bad into less luck. So it's not, for example, that you do something good that like gold falls out of the sky or something, but when you do something good, you're more likely to be more successful, and the effects of this are mostly immediate and in your life. A third piece is that karma isn't suddenly appearing in our world in the status quo. We're imagining a separate world where karma has always existed. And for the fourth piece of framing, the most successful people in the world we prefer are likely to be the most virtuous people, as with the most luck you get the furthest in life. For example, you get the most voters, you get the good campaign, you see an opportunity. Now, for our first argument about inclination to do good. In this world, people are more inclined to do good and to be altruistic and to be selfish, to not be selfish. So why is this? So because this is a world where karma has always existed, people are likely to believe it. Why? Well, first of all, they see these successful people, right? They see these successful people doing good. They think like, okay, we make the connection. They see good people rising to the top. They make the connection in their head. But also because they hear stories from their friends and family. For example, your grandma being like, I helped someone yesterday and suddenly my groceries were 90% off. They also think, there must be something wrong. But also because it has always existed, it is likely to have been adopted into most cultures. So example, that's in movies seen, it's in children's book, at school, they're like, yes?
People act altruistically for a variety of reasons, such as empathy, such as the fact that we follow rules-based social order. Why does your argument reach a crucial tipping point in terms of getting more altruism?
Because in this world, of course, you have the people that want to do good, but even the selfish people, they're gonna want to do good because they're being rewarded. So you have the people who are empty, they do good, they get rewarded, it's reinforced, like, oh, I want to do even more good. And the people that are selfish, they're doing good, they get rewarded, they think, oh, I also want to do good because it rewards me. Not only because, so they don't even have to care about the other people, but they still do good most of the time. Also, people just experience this in real time, right? They help someone, they feel, and suddenly they encounter something good, or they get more support. So because of this, it's reinforced in society the idea that karma exists and that it helps you in life, that you get more lucky because of this. The impact of this, people believe in this, most people want luck, right? Most people want to be successful because successful is like the best way, one of the best ways to get happy. So they're more likely to be virtuous, they're more likely to help others. And because of that, others get happier because, they get support, they get help, they feel like good deeds are doing something. Less likely to have conflicts because people we don't want to harm others because that will result in bad karma. And people who are virtuous themselves, they just get luck. Luck can make you happy because you're likely to be successful or find good opportunities in life. Our second argument is about that because of the most successful people lead the world, they are the most virtuous, leads to less inequality and conflict. So why is this? So for structural inequality, like things like racism, poverty, those things, you need people with bad intentions, with lots of power, so that they can oppress this group, so that they can create these constructs, harming constructs. So in this world, this is much less likely, because first of all, the people who want to do these things, much less likely to get in power. Like, they're in intention, they're doing actively trying to harm another group. They're probably like not going to get luck with their campaign or something, or get help by people. Secondly, even if they do get in power, the people who have to carry out their commands, they're probably not going to follow them, because they also believe in this karma system, as it's so reinforced in society. They're probably going to be like, I don't want to like hurt these people, because that's going to result in bad karma. Another point is, like, imagine you inherit a lot of power. You're like born into a family of successful people, but you are bad intentioned. You're likely to lose that power because you're doing bad stuff. Even if at the beginning you had lots of power, you get bad karma, you get no luck, you're likely to lose it. People are likely to call it out and do something about it. Also, the people who accidentally do bad stuff, they're more likely to address it because they want the best for the world. Oh, and on top of all of this, people with so that's the thing. Poverty requires poverty and all those problems. They require oppression. They require exploitation, and the people stopping with support for that. But the people who are likely to do this are much less likely to be in power. And then thank you. So, and even when these things happen, people are likely to do something about it, because they see bad harm and they think, no, we want to do good, we want to create virtues. So how do all these things link back to the motion and to our framing, why we create this world where most people are happy? So, because both these arguments incline to do good, and that there's less inequality, less harmful constructs around people, people are less likely to experience bad scenarios. We have a just world where there are less problems and you're actually rewarded for the good you do. People do good because they believe in this karma system most of the time. And we acknowledge that there can be crazy people, for example, who don't believe in this karma system. People are like, no, I don't believe it. Or who just really want to do bad stuff. But that is a small, minor group. And even when they are there, they have a very small impact on society because they have the bad karma, they have no luck, and they're likely not to get far in life or, for example, get a position where they can preach these ideas. So that's likely, even for the small group who have bad intentions, they're not likely to have a big impact on society. So in the end, because people do good, people are helped, people feel themselves being rewarded, there's less harming concepts and power. For example, think about the fact that lots of things that we consider bad, like robberies and stuff, they are because people just like in a bad situation. These situations are not likely to happen. So most people will be happy, are happy in the world we prefer. Thank you.
What I tell you in the next 8 minutes is going to be clear enough and not particularly complicated. That this motion was never about intention or morality. It is very clearly about good and bad actions. That means we judge people on their consequences and the things they do, not who they are inside. We think it's unjust for that reason, and for those reasons we're very, very proud to oppose. 4 things I'm going to do for you here. Number 1, I'll give you a stance and some refutation. Finally, 2 arguments. 1 on how karmic retribution is unfair for the people who get punished, notably a large group of people which they almost entirely don't acknowledge on their side. 2nd, that people end up leading overly cautious lives, why that actually costs us in the long term when we don't get positive externalities of people taking risks and ultimately doing things that are good for everyone. First, with the stance, a couple of general things that we would agree with them on. We think punishment and like reward is probably proportional to what you do, right? You're not like getting exponentially more. Every time you donate to charity, you'll probably get something that is roughly equal to the amount of good that you did. Same for the amount of bad. We also agree that people would realize over time that some sort of karmic system exists, at least for the majority of people who like have eyes and ears. We would much prefer the status quo on op, which is where people have different belief systems on what is good based on independent factors that are unique to them and the places that they live in. But they have an overall fairly similar like moral code of killing people is bad and you shouldn't attack each other. We also think there's a justice system and all sorts of incentive systems in place to reward people for doing good things and to punish them for doing bad things. We'll prove to you later on why that's actually superior to their impersonal God coming down and cosmically doing his own justice on their side. Finally, we think there are guiding moral principles which are both internally derived as well as externally imposed onto us that still exist on our side. Refutation. Off the bat, their framing is based on an assertion that you can do something bad and not be punished on their side. This is untrue. If we reread the motion in the info slide, the motion isn't about bad intention or bad morality. It is purely consequentialist when it talks about bad and good actions. That means things like lying are just bad because that is a violation of someone's trust. That means killing someone is just bad, irrespective if you're a soldier or if there's some other element of your job that may compel you to, or if you're defending yourself. There are actions that are considered objectively bad or good on their side. I'll take you a little bit later. Then they give you two arguments. Now, the second argument is a downstream impact of the first and are based on the exact same reasoning, which is that people act more altruistically and will solve good problems on their side. Two responses. Number one, there's no actual benefit to you when you do something good, right? And this is important, as in, if you donate to charity, you get a proportional amount of good back. But your life is not better than before when you donated to charity. So you still need that additional incentive to make you do something good, as in, every amount of good that you do will only give you a similar amount of good back. Nothing actually improves in your life, and that the amount of money that went out of your bank account is still there. It's still not there. Second, in most cases, there are intrinsic and extrinsic incentives to do good on our side. In a lot of cases, we have created them, right, to incentivize, for example, rich people to do philanthropy. We have created them to punish wrongdoers by sending them to prison. All this stuff still exists, and we access a very similar scale of impacts on our side. First argument on why karmic retribution is unfair, which they ignore. I think the premise is that karmic retribution is only concerned with good or bad actions and not intentions. There are three reasons why this is particularly harmful. Number one, people are regularly coerced into bad actions specifically because of their circumstances. That means if you are lower income, it is much more likely that you are forced to commit a crime out of necessity because that is what you need to fulfill your very basic needs or the needs of those very close to you. If you are facing hate or discrimination, we think it is understandable that your actions are maybe less rational because you are angry at the people who deal injustice onto you. I think you can be in moments of passion and vulnerability. And that's important to us. That people aren't perfect, right? That my mom will yell at bad drivers on the road, and that doesn't make her a bad person who deserves to be stuck behind slow drivers the rest of her life. She is still a good enough person, and we all have our moments of vulnerability where we make mistakes. That doesn't mean you should expect some sort of karmic punishment 30 years down the line. Second, I think people are punished irrespective of if they've changed. That means it is entirely possible on our side to access atonement, to access reconciliation or forgiveness from someone you've done wrong unto. It's not possible on their side, because the info slide and the emotion don't tell us anything about karmic justice accounting for you becoming a better person. So even if you become a better person, if 10 years ago you did something bad, that punishment is still hovering over your head for the rest of your life. Third, we think we punish people who make genuine mistakes on their side. Listen, a lot of this stuff is just intentional, right? These are people who aren't that bright and make mistakes. For all the pain I've inflicted onto my team, I wouldn't say I'm a bad person. I wouldn't say I deserve to be punished karmically by some sort of god, even though I have, of course, created a scale of pain onto other people. Two impacts of this argument. Number one, you create unjust punishment, which is that good people, or now good people who have been able to reform and lead better lives now, are forced into painful experiences. When you cause pain onto other people, that pain comes back to you. I think that is especially bad for people who have now changed or are good. We don't think they should still be held accountable for their actions that took place a long time ago. And the key word that we get in the info slide, or the motion, I forget, there is eventually, right? That eventually there's a punishment or a reward that comes onto you. We don't know when that is, and they can't define it for us either, because it's all karmic and it's all cosmic, and who knows, it's all floating in the clouds. We think it is more likely than not that it just keeps people waiting, and is much more difficult on their lives. Second, I think it leads to a bad cycle of action, which is to say we get even worse circumstances, right? If you do something bad in a moment of passion and vulnerability, and something bad happens to you, you get hit by a truck or something, and now you have to pay your medical bills, you are now in a worse circumstance than when you began. And you have to continue to do bad things to be able to support yourself maybe, if that is your only option, right? For the people who are in circumstances where they can't pull themselves up by their bootstraps because they're stuck in neighborhoods or places that are specifically tough on them, they just have to keep doing bad things, and you create a loop where people are fundamentally forced to do so. I think there's a biological aversion of pain, right? That in those moments you're not thinking rationally. If you truly can't feed yourself, you have to do something that just forces them into worse and worse situations. So they condemn the people who are most vulnerable on their side. Happy to take a point.
Didn't we say in our first speech that it's unlikely that these constructs are there because these constructs are created by people who want to harm others, like poverty?
Yeah, you said plenty of things in your first speech, right? Everything with the info side and the emotion reflects is our version of events, which is that ultimately these punishments come based on your actions, not necessarily based on your intentions, your morality. You can say things. I think it's more likely that our version of events is correct. Second argument here, and I'll prove to you here, This argument applies irrespective of which side's framing you buy. We think it is still just as applicable, which is that people now lead lives that are overly cautious. 3 things to note. That number 1, humans are naturally super duper risk averse. There is a risk in anything that you do that could lead to good or bad, that will result in some sort of good or bad consequence. And that means you will just do less. Doing less is safer. There is no consequence if you accidentally hurt someone down the line and that leads to someone that you care about being hurt, for example. People are too irreversibly averse to anything which could harm them. And that means they're less likely to do things, for example, that prevent bad things. They're less likely to do big things in their lives, to take big risks, because those can have the greatest magnitude of harm. Second, the extension of this is that people don't try to rectify bad actions and he fears of making them worse. Listen, if I've already hurt my friends through the words that I've said, trying to reach out might reawaken that pain and make it even worse. So I'm more likely to just shut down entirely and do nothing. That is worse in the long term, because most of the time when you do reach out and try to atone with good intentions, that does work and that creates a better society where people feel like they're with others that they can be safe and comfortable around. Third, even if people are deterred from bad action on prop, we think people are just nervous and terrified all the time. As in, I did something bad and I just know a bad thing will happen eventually to me. People just keeping tab, right? I did something 10 years ago. When is that going to come back to haunt me? We think this is a bad lifestyle to condemn onto people, even if they are bad people. They don't necessarily deserve the stress and nervousness that comes with a lifetime of when am I going to get hit by a truck because I accidentally hit someone when I was young. The impact here. I want to consider very carefully the impact of cautiousness, which is that people take less risks that can go on to create positive externalities for everybody else. The guy who invented fertilizer, which went on to feed 2 billion people, was also in weapons manufacturing, right? By all means, he probably should have been dead by then. We think there are people who maybe aren't great who will go on to do great things, and that is the nature of what it means to be a person. I don't share prop cynicism. I think humans can change, atone, and create our own accountability. We're very, very proud to oppose.
The leader of opposition is engaging in vague definitions of what karma is, of what people would do, while we as the prop side has given you a very clear model of how karma functions, of how karma is indoctrinated into culture, and how this might affect people. Just going down the line with some major pieces of rebuttal. 1, karma does not work like I give $2 to a homeless man and then I suddenly get $2 in my bank account, right? As we have characterized, it probably works like something like luck. I give $2 to a homeless man, I may be a slightly more lucky when I'm trying to catch the bus next day, right? It's not like a proportional reward that's of monetary or material value, but as we say, it's a relative boost in your agency when you're trying to accomplish some things, right? So again, please engage with our framework. Secondly, on fear, we tell you that there is likely this cultural framing around karma, much like how in today's society we believe hard work will lead to good consequences, right? There is no iron law hovering over your head that says, bad action definitively leads to bad consequences, though we think that necessarily doesn't even have to be a good thing, which I'll engage with later, right? Okay. So our opponents basically talk about 2 things. One thing they worry about is that bad circumstances drive people into bad action. Bad action leads to more bad circumstances because of karma. This is their first point. However, how we engage with this in our constructive speech is that we tell you that in a world where karma exists, these bad circumstances are less likely to arise in the first place, and even if they arise, they're likely fixable because people are more altruistic. For example, if a person in a karmatic world is poor, they probably don't have to steal to get food because on the street, people are more likely to give them money, more likely to actually give them food because they're more inclined to good action, right? Secondly, our unique mechanism, even outside of what they said, we have legal systems that structure people to do more good things, is that uniquely in our world, people in power are more likely to be more altruistic because of how we mechanize the idea of karma, right? If I do more good things, if I behave more virtuistically, I'm more likely to be successful in my pursuits. Ergo power, ergo success, right? But secondly, just onto how they sort of analyze and try to say that there are more incentives in the current world to actually allow us to do good things. We have laws, we have social expectations. However, these laws and social expectations are highly contingent on structural inequalities, right? For example, world leaders today, like Trump, for example, can basically get away with anything, right? These laws and orders and social structures did not constrain these powerful people. However, in our world, uniquely, this cosmic justice equally applies to everyone, which means that everyone is equally likely, is equally likely to be incentivized to do good things and to do good things, right? Okay. Secondly, the justice system of today is not really built on sort of a universal respect for human rights, right? There is a lot of sort of political, capitalistic, or colonial gains enshrined in law that I think our opponents need to actually engage with. For example, back in the past, there was voting laws on certain racial minorities, et cetera, right? So our opponents need to engage with why current justice systems likely incentivize good courses of action, so like that's something they also have to engage with. But yeah. Lastly, our opponents talk about reform, right? They talk about if we accidentally do something bad, if I have a violent outburst because of my emotions, what's the justice in punishing these people? We tell you that, one, you don't really have to worry about this because if it's truly an emotional outburst, if I truly just shout at my teammates because I'm frustrated, it's likely a very tiny magnitude of bad done, therefore a very tiny magnitude of bad karma. Secondly, if it's truly a sporadic outburst of emotion, it's not likely to happen repeatedly in a very short period of time, therefore the punishment is less likely to be, highly damaging towards your life. Third, even if you do bad, after I finish this point, but even if you're doing bad actions, even if you cause harm unto others, these problems are more likely to be fixed because, again, we encourage more altruistic action where we actively seek out places that we can do good and do good. Therefore, the bad actions that people conduct are more likely to be fixed in our world in either way. Yes?
Yes, the law isn't perfect, but it's by humans for humans, and it gets better over the arc of history. I think on your side, this cosmic retribution doesn't actually account for individual differences.
It's by white men, by colonists, by capitalists, for white men, for capitalists, for colonists, right? The history of the judicial system is deeply rooted in a Eurocentric framework that constantly excludes, for example, queer people in the last century, ethnic minorities, and even now it's structurally oppressing the poor, right? Our financial system doesn't offer policy to actually allow these people to invest. It doesn't offer enough protections to make sure they don't get exploited by banks, and it doesn't penalize these actions of powerful actors trying to do bad things to weak and vulnerable people, right? So again, why in their world are they actually incentivizing good actions, right? Even in our world, we're incentivized to do bad things. We're incentivized to, have the worst sort of business practices possible to trick consumers into buying things that they don't actually need. Our world is structured in such a way that we encourage so much selfish action, that we encourage so much, action of domination and dispossession. So I think our opponents really need to analyze what the actual current legal system is incentivizing people to do. Okay. Yeah, so onto some bit more mechanization of why sort of structural inequalities and the bad circumstances our opponent worries about, like poverty, like discrimination, is less likely to even occur in the world that we prefer, right? One, as my first speaker has characterized, these structures are all constructed by a people in power, right? Whether that people be Europeans, be capitalists, whatever. It requires there to be a powerful actor with ill intentions of dispossession, of discrimination, or of violence. Why this won't likely occur in our world, again, is based on the characterization of how karma works, right? If I am a person with bad intentions, if I want to harm another person, if I view them as inherently, inferior to me and treat them as such, I'm more likely to have bad karma. What this translates into is that when I try to do something, for example, get elected into office, I'll be less likely to do so because I'll encounter less chance opportunities that help me on this campaign than, for example, a good intentioned candidate who cares for everyone equally, right? So firstly, these people are less likely to get into power and positions where they can manufacture these structures of oppression and dispossession in the first place. Secondly, even if they do, so let's pretend a person is well-intentioned, they got into power, and they suddenly become ill-intentioned, right? We say that even in this circumstance, structurally there is more checks against individual bad actors at the top because we are still organized, like government's still organized in a hierarchical structure, or at least a bureaucratic structure, where many functionaries are arranged, to carry out orders, right? And we argue that in this case, these functionaries, following the same mechanism of luck, they're more likely to be virtuous because only by being virtuous can they gain enough karma and karmic luck to reach those positions of power where they can carry out these orders, right? So these people are also likely to be more virtuous, thus they're more likely to question bad orders that come at the top, even if this person gets to the top in the first place. Meaning that bad orders, bad leaders, their actions are less likely to be carried out throughout the world world, causing these structures in the third place. Thirdly, reinforcing the idea of sort of, people who are born into this privilege and are bad intentioned. Similarly, because they're bad intentioned, their karma will be losing, their karma will be gradually decreasing, they'll encounter more bad luck. Therefore, the power and the influence and resources they have built over their lifetime is likely going to collapse because of this bad karma, meaning that they will have little influence on the world in a few years. Lastly, there's this idea of active goodness that I wish to propose, is that because in a world of karma, we believe we will be rewarded for our good actions, we're not just likely to do good. We're likely to actively look for situations where we can do good, where we can maximize my karma. So it's not just I would give to charity to people on the street. It's likely I will seek out homeless people and I'll try to help as many homeless people as possible. Based on this, very glad to propose. Thank you.
My time starts in 3, 2, 1. The world of proposition is cold. It's a world where people and humanity is bound by a system that is rigid, in which they are bound by morals that are often unclear, where they are bound by a sort of cosmic retribution that is deeply oppressive. We'd say on our side of the house, we believe in the ability of humanity to improve. We believe in the ability of people to become better people. Few things in this speech. First, a third argument and some characterization as to why morality is subjective and why this creates a huge amount of coercive power for those in positions of power to weaponize karma. And then two themes. First, on why people are more altruistic on our side of the house. Secondly, whether this is better or worse for people in terms of punishment and being unfairly punished. Third argument then on why morality is indeed subjective and why this is very, very bad. We'd say that in the status quo, systems of morality are often highly diverse and highly limited, right? For example, in Asian cultures, it is considered moral, for example, to be more modest, to be less assertive, and whereas Western morals are often very, very different from that kind of modesty, where it's more encouraged to be like individualistic and more assertive. Karma and the sense of karmic retribution reduces it to a homogeneous system. And yet the nuance here is that no one in this world, even though they're aware that the system of karma exists through just trial and error and basic human observation, no one knows exactly the metrics by which this cosmic deity works, right? No one knows how this god will strike them down from the heavens. And so this uncertainty and the fear that we've characterized to you out of first opposition means that there is a huge amount of coercive power from people in power who can manipulate the narrative of karma and decide what is good or bad. Basically, they manipulate and weaponize the anxiety of people to make them feel as if certain things are more moral than others, or certain things will result in more punishment than others. This is made infinitely worse on their side of the house. It looks like a politician encouraging you to give money to their cause, for example, by saying that it will result in good moral outcomes for you and result in increased luck for you because you're doing the moral action, right? Especially when people are vulnerable and afraid, it means that they are more likely to listen to these powerful forces. And so the proposition pushback that we get is that law is defined by, white men, for example, and the law and justice system are already defined by colonizers on our side of the house. We said that this was getting better over time. The world was getting more equal and more progressive over time. But karma is regressive. Retribution is something that is stuck in the past. We said that that was an irreversible harm. First theme then on whether people are more or less altruistic to others. And I want to clash with proposition's first point, which is that they never prove the exclusivity of altruism on their side of the house. We gave you 3 structural reasons as to why people are actually good in the status quo to a sufficient degree. One, that we often have moral compasses, right? This is taught to us by parents, for example, that you should take care of your siblings, that you should be nice to the other kids on the playground. This is taught to us by religion, to do things like love thy neighbor. It's taught to us by huge amounts of just every single part of society that's telling us in general to be good Samaritans. Secondly, on the rule of law and social order, that in the most extreme cases on their side of the house, the worst examples that they can think of, we also address things like rape and murder. We are able to address through the rule of law and through the justice system because these blatant violations of other people's dignity are already addressed by the justice system and by just people following a social order. Thirdly, there's biological instincts to care about other people, that from the beginning of time we relied on other people to survive, so biologically we develop a kind of respect and compassion for other members of our tribe, for the entirety of humanity. Okay, let's clash with what they say on inequality and deterrence then. They say that they're somehow able to fix things like racism and poverty because bad people don't get into power. Listen to their own language. They tell you the metric by which to do this is by somehow attributing luck to people. People now get more lucky. This is so intangible. Even if we accept that this is the system by which they assign like better points, it is incredibly intangible to people because we have an irrational like bias that things that are more immediate are like more tangible, right? So things that are far into the future, you might get marginally more lucky 3 years on. That's very difficult for people to perceive. It's also just the fact that evil will exist on either side, right? Things like nationalism and the rise of the Nazis, they faced death for hanging for their war crimes, right? And yet they still did it. Wars are still fought for things like economic opportunity because those opportunities are seen as more massive and more immediate compared to the intangible luck that you may experience after this. America was built off of the slave trade regardless because of economic opportunity. We'd say that this would happen anyways. Sure, I'll take you.
Don't you think that the people who want to do this bad stuff like war are less likely to get in power, like we mentioned in our speeches?
The refutation was just given, which is that these people, the incentives of things like economic opportunity or the inherent evil within these powerful individuals will exist either way. But even if we accept that deterrence happens from bad things, they never engage with our flip of altruism, which is that Eric told you that people are indeed risk averse, which means that I'm afraid of now standing up for a friend, which may cause me to lie and experience some like decrease in points far into the future. That now I'm afraid to apologize, for example, to my girlfriend if it makes them cry. I choose neutrality because I am now risk averse. It means that people are less kind and take less risks to be good Samaritans. I want to weigh this. We'd say that the number of good people in the world who are inherently kind and compassionate and have the potential to do massive amounts of good is far larger than the amount of people who just possess inherent evil in their hearts. So even if they're able to somewhat neutralize the threat of evil people, we'd say that the deterrence effect on just the huge amounts of good people who would have done more good on our side of the house is greater. So we'd say that's far worse. Finally, on justice and retribution, we'd say that people can get better as human beings on our side of the house. They're able to learn from things like experience, like the fact that like you might, if you say something out in public, you'll get punched in the face, and life will teach you to be a better person over time, right? Karma, we'd say, is the worst form of retribution. You don't learn from it because it is deeply intangible. It happens 3 years into the future. You're unable to connect it to the original harm that you caused, and it means that you never learn from the action that you did. Okay, second theme then, on whether this is better or worse for people. Okay, here's why this is judged off of consequences and not some like weird Kantian philosophy, which is the impersonal entity can't take into account context in many cases. It cannot step into your shoes. But even if it were omniscient, it's simply hard to judge that people act in morally gray ways, that they don't always have perfect good or bad intentions. That if you rob a store to save your family, sure you might have good intentions, but you still caused harm to that store owner. It is impossible to judge those morally gray things. And so we'd say that this entity would default to the path of least resistance, as Eric said, judge people off of their actions. And so this means that circumstance is not taken into account. It means that poor people, for example, are disproportionately punished for the crimes of circumstance that they must commit. It means that irrationality is not taken into account. We'd say that this is important because there are ways in which you can just act selfishly to protect your interests that we don't think are so bad. For example, you might save your kids even if you screw over someone else's. We'd say that you have the right to act selfishly without punishment. There are two reasons for this. One is that you are the best person to protect yourself, that you are in the best position to preserve your own health and safety. Secondly, that you have special obligations to the people around you and the people who are close to you and who you love. And so we'd say that there are two harms of this punishment. One, it disproportionately harms poor people and minorities. And secondly, it still punishes people even if they've atoned, and it reduces their faith in improvement. It means that people become bad people over time. We'd say that for all of these reasons, we win on opposition. Proud to oppose.
I will start my speech in 3, 2. Dear panel, in this debate I've seen three major questions that need to be answered to confirm that opposition wins this debate. First, on which side of the house are people actually better, right? So we keep pushing to you that people will actually have the incentive to be better because they will build up good karma, right? They can't. We see that they are inherently trying to be better because they know that good things will happen to them if they be better, right? Okay, they say for sometimes people are. We also say people are trying to be more altruistic, right? We see that people try to be virtuous because they see in their leaders what they do. They see in their leaders how to get successful, right? They see that people who are succeeding right now, that there are certain behind this to actually achieve more karma. So we think on our side of the house, people will actually be more virtuous and they actually more trying to become a better person, right? Then they have a point about people accidentally being bad, right? That they accidentally do things and then try to compensate and then keep doing bad things because they are like, oh, I'm gonna get this bad thing happening at some point in me, so why just keep hanging this? We see that we actually can minimize this impact, right? Our second speaker also already stressed this, right? They already said how that if you maybe make a mistake, you can also compensate this with doing better or solving this problem. And because we think that more people are actually virtuous, they will actually have more incentive to try to be better, right? To try to fix their problems if they make mistakes. So even if people make mistakes on our side of the house, they will still try to actually make this better. No, thank you. Secondly, on which side of the house does the structure actually allow people to be better? We see that in the status quo and that in a world of opposition, that we actually see that that the structure is determining also things you can do and you cannot do, right? If you're born in poverty, this also something they say. Like if you're born in bad circumstances, it's less likely for you to act virtuous, right? But we see that these bad circumstances are less likely to happen on our side of the house at all, because the people that are in power are actually more able to solve these problems. And we also stress this by saying, okay, for these conditions to happen, you need two things. You need people with bad intentions, and those people need to be in power, right? Why will these people don't be in power? Because they do bad actions, they build up bad karma, therefore will be less likely to be in this position. No, thank you. Therefore, we see that even if those people get into power somehow, they must have built up some good karma, and if they then do a very bad karma, then they will just get down and will not be able to achieve the things they would want to achieve at all. So we think that the point in which structure actually allows this, we think that on our side of the house this is way more clear, right? On their side of the house you have discrimination, you have people are conquering with each other. If you want to get into college right now, you have to be very competitive. You have to go over people's backs to actually get to a good place, right? But in our world, what you need to do is be good to others, be good and take good actions to actually come here. So we think that on our side of the house, it's only on our side of the house it's actually possible to achieve that success you want without doing bad things in the long run. Yes.
Yeah, the part of our case you miss is that bad people tend to be irrational. They're passionate and they're vulnerable, but they're not considering the consequences when they do something that's evil.
Okay, yeah. So you say also there are bad people and they don't understand the consequences, right? But even if people that are causing harm are there to do this, there are also people beneath that. Like also my second speaker already stressed, that will be likely to try to solve the bad things that these people do, right? Because if someone is homeless, or someone is in poverty, there are more people to actually help to lift them up, to actually help them to do this, because they're more virtuous, right? So even if there are a few people that are irrational, angrily, or are doing bad stuff and don't realize it, then still this will get compromised, right? And then also a lot of people still have the incentive to, even if you're doing bad things, you still have to be it's very irrational to actually do bad things, because you're still guided by the incentive to do good things. Even if you lack empathy to what happens to a person, you will still be able to follow this system and to be able to realize that you actually need to do good things to actually succeed. so we do think that truly bad people are not likely to happen. If it happens, it isn't that big a deal. Then a third point: on which side of the house are the leaders actually better to the people? We see on our side of the house that the people who are in charge are actually better, right? We have a few mechanisms for this. We say no, thank you. We say that if you would be in power. You have to have good karma to actually come there, right? You have to have the good karma to be lucky to actually be able to succeed in the actions you want to do. So you need to build this up. You already have built up like good impact on our side of the house to actually get in power. Then that's also very likely. So it's likely that they're like more able to care and help other people, right? Then. But if there are people that, for example, get born into power but have bad intentions, they will eventually lose this power, right? If they get to a place, no, thank you. If they get in a place, for example, when you're born into a family with a lot of power, but you have bad intentions, you don't have to have karma to like gain it, then you still will lose this power before you actually will be able to use it, because you will have the bad luck, which will not be able to cause you this harm. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. And then also what's really important, if there is a leader that has bad intentions, there are still people they need to like function. They need to like people to do the work for them, right? But because these people are looking at all the most of the people that are in power that do good things, because that's way more likely to happen, they're probably very virtuous, and they will probably not agree with this, right? Because it's also a harm for themselves, because they will then eventually lose the power. So at the end of the day, what we have standing in this debate is that outside the house, people are actually content with their lives. They're actually likely to do more good, to take care of each other, and to take care of themselves, and bad circumstances are less likely to happen, which can never happen in opposition, therefore never been prouder to propose.
Cool. Are we good to start? Okay. I'll get started in 3, 2, 1. We on side opposition believe that many of the problems, if not most of the problems in the world, are not caused by good or evil, but they're caused by complacency. And under their side of the house, you infinitesimally increase the amount of complacency that exists in society. Look, the people that set up capitalism, the people that set up systems of government were not evil. Individually, they were not evil, but they exist in a system that perhaps is evil. Under their side of the house, they do nothing to resist these forces, because people are much more afraid of doing bad things than potentially doing good. What am I going to be talking about in this speech today? A few main things. 1, what exactly are we talking about in terms of what this kind of cosmic power looks like? 2, some like basic framing stuff, and then 2 main themes. 1, on which side does more good, and I will measure this on frequency and severity, as well as who this good is being done to. And then a second theme on like, quality of life, like general, like people being alive outside of like systems of power. Firstly then, let's talk a little bit more of what we are talking about. In this debate, intentions will likely not matter, because this is a deeply impersonal force. Judge, I think you likely buy this as well. It gets too complicated if this impersonal force also have to consider the various nuances. This is probably the easiest way to think about this debate. But the second thing that we'd like to know is probably capitalism still exists, poverty still exists, because these systems just exist in the world that there are, right? Like the people that started capitalism or the people that named it were, no thank you, evil. And honestly, like many rich people aren't evil either. Like they're not intentionally trying to like oppress poor people all the time. They just happen to be rich. And we don't think that under their side of the house you deal with this problem at all. We would actually argue that rich people are way less likely to help poor people. I will give reasons as to why, no thank you. Alright then, I'm going to move on to my first theme. My first theme is very simple. Which side does more good? And I'm measuring this on 2 main metrics. Before I move on to any of this though, I want to note it is actually deeply uncertain the benefits and the harms that you place on other people. And they notice this as well, right? But specifically the important part of this is it's uncertain the amount of good you will do to people, right? Because you don't actually know, perhaps donating to charity, the exact amount of money or the exact amount of utility or luck that you're able to get back. However, having bad luck really sucks, and humans tend to not want bad things to happen to them all the time, because it is more present in our mind, it exists in our brains more, which means that people are way less likely going to do like tend to do like good things because they're worried. But the second thing that I want to note before I get onto this is this idea that probably under their side of the house, you have less social norms to be good. That is to say, you have less of a moral compass of people just doing good things because they can, because under their side of the house, there's an active incentive to only do good things where you have a significant and almost certain output of that good. Two metrics then. One, on frequency. Why do we win this claim on frequency? Why will numerically people just do more good things and do less bad things? We think under our side of the house, because people are more risk averse, they will just likely do less good things, right? And they will probably, under our side of the house, in this present world, do more good things because of a moral compass, because they themselves individually are able to validate themselves and feel good about the things that they're able to do. But then the question becomes, well, what about the frequency of the bad things? We gave you numerous content under this that went wholly unresponded to. A few main things. One, we told you that there's probably a marginal decrease in the number of bad things because most of the bad things people do are either accidents or it's not exactly their fault or it's actually deeply unclear and context is very, very important. But also that people begin to lose their moral compass, they're way less likely to intervene. We would argue that is also a bad thing, right? Doing nothing is probably also a bad thing in a traditional definition. But the second thing, and we talked about this too, is you're just more likely to be resentful, right? Like if you have an interaction with a minority group, you say something hurtful and then you have bad luck and like your car breaks down or like you get run over by a bus, probably when you're voting, you're not going to be like super sympathetic. And maybe this is not a logical reasoning as to why, but people do think that, right? Harms that are immediate to them, they begin to blame on the people that caused the harm in the first place, right? If you say something really hurtful to your friend and then your cat dies, you are probably not going to talk to that friend very much, even if it is, in fact, your own fault. We also told you are way less likely to recompense for the bad things that you do because you don't want to make the situation worse. Because once again, you are uncertain the amount of harm or benefit that would come for you talking to this person. So let's say I get into an altercation with my friend, a really, really mean one, my cat dies. If I continue this altercation, who knows, maybe my dog will die too. It's probably better to just leave the conversation as it is. We think this is incredibly bad in order for people to right the wrongs that they previously did. Like if you are, racist, or you are sexist, or you did something really, really terrible, why would you have any incentive to make it better if you're worried that they're going to scream at you or you say something wrong, right? We think that this means that people are way less likely going to recompense for the bad things, which means frequency-wise we win. But let's talk about severity, right? Notice their only claim on severity is that, well, you will look at leaders who do good things and they are virtuous, and as a result, you will do more good things. But this is not exclusive to this motion, right? But presumably, currently, we also support and uplift people as a society that tend to do good things, right? That's why we uplift philanthropists, and we tend to drag down people that are really bad, or we have things like revolutions. So it's actually deeply unclear the extent of this self-reinforcing claim. Why can't this exist under our side of the house, even in a world absent of karma? But the better version of this claim is, well, it's luck. So probability-wise, it might be the case that there are more good people there because they don't all the bad people end up kicked out. However, notice their own logic. They say that it's not that bad people are impossible to get in power, that they're unlikely to. And given that people are more likely to be complacent, when bad people do get into power, the harm of that is so much more severe because way less people are trying to stop them because they're also worried of terrible things happening to them for the exact same reasons. What does this then suggest? We would argue that even on basis of weighing, maybe it's true that numerically they get less individually kind of evil people, but when a really evil person gets there, it's really hard to stop, right? And that really evil person can pollute the minds of other people who otherwise would have had good intentions, but now have bad intentions, and there's virtually nothing you can do about it. All right then, continuing on. The second part of the severity claim that we want to talk about is who will you do the most good to? And this is this idea of proximity. We would actually argue that you as a normal, middle class, or even rich person are way less likely to help a homeless person. Why? Because you actually are unclear about the preferences and the needs of that homeless person. You probably know the least about that homeless person as you do of anyone else, which means you're way less likely to help them. Because what if you give them a food and it gives them food poisoning and your cat ends up dying as a result of that? Right? You're way less likely to help people way less proximate to you. That also influences your political decisions, not just your individual decisions, right? But you way more want to help people that you know you can certainly help. This means maybe you treat your family a little bit better. However, we think that the biggest harm here is that you don't treat people you don't know as well because you're worried of the bad things that will happen to you. We think that just means you have way less good Samaritans. I think that's actually a really important part of when we're thinking about societal cohesion. We think that this directly engages with the content of how you will help people be less poor. I think you will just help people be more poor because you actually won't help them. So maybe weighing-wise, also numerically, there are less poor people, but the poor people sell for infinitesimally more because no one is willing to help them. As we said, it's also dubious if there's less poor people we think that capitalism probably just means that there's poor people on either side of the house and people are less likely to help them. All right then, second theme, and as you probably noticed, maybe slightly less important theme, but we think that this is the theme that they went unengaged with, which is why I'm not spending a lot of time. What did we say? We said that this creates a culture of fear and anxiety for everyone, right? Because the early part of this debate is like people in power and like all that other crazy stuff. But like for a real everyday person that's standing here right now, we'd say life really sucks and you feel a lot of anxiety for potentially the bad things that you do because you're some of the times not exactly certain, right? You don't know some of the bad things you do and you don't know the consequences of how that bad luck will manifest in your life. They say that you will be socially conditioned to not worry about this, but this is a comparative debate. So obviously in this world, under their side of the house, you will feel more feelings of anxiety, you will feel more scared, and that means that you are less likely to take risks, but also like just human suffering. Like you will suffer more as a human being. We think this is really, really bad. Most people, like most normal people, just do bad things because they're accidents, or that bad things happen to them and they feel as if they have a fit of emotional rage. They don't really concede that lots of people have fits of emotional rage. And we think it's unjustified and unfair for those people to be punished and to suffer as a result of that thing. We think that is incredibly problematic. The bottom line is very, very simple. They have not given us any refutation on this idea of complacency. All the problems that they have in this round, and they've identified in this round, don't actually stem from the root problem, which is that people actively are just bad because they do evil things. For those reasons, incredibly proud to oppose. Thanks.
Time starts in 3, 2, 1. Proposition is simultaneously super optimistic and yet super nihilistic. On one hand, they're optimistic that they can solve war because somehow bad people and Hitler would have gotten unlucky in their lives. On the other hand, they say that people can't improve and that they deserve divine punishment and can't be good people on their own because of compassion and empathy. We stood on the side of optimism, that we believed in the power of people to be good and we believed in the power of atonement. There's going to be two themes in the speech. First, on whether we encourage good or acts or not. Secondly, on punishment of bad acts. First, let's talk about encouraging good acts and altruism. We gave you multiple structural reasons for why people are going to do good on our side of the house because of natural instincts, because of the moral compass that was drilled into you from a very, very young age. Note that we defend the status quo where the majority of people, maybe not all people, but the majority of people do in fact are able to balance things like self-interest along with altruism, where people do in fact donate to charity, where people do live under a social order and the rule of law. But we told you out of our third that these things erode on proposition, that you get used to acting well only for expectations of good things happening to you in the future, that this reduces altruism. But even if they got marginally more altruism encouraged, we were able to flip this because we say that there is way more good that is suppressed by the rigidity of karmic retribution, that people become complacent and they prefer neutrality over risk, that you are afraid to speak out and advocate for others because you are afraid of disrupting the social order, that you are afraid to protest, for example. Sometimes protest does take violence and does take morally dubious actions. You're afraid to protest against power structures for your own rights because you're afraid of that disruption and you're afraid of some kind of divine punishment. Very simply, people are afraid of doing good on their side of the house. That is the worst impact in this round. We told you that evil doesn't happen through a few awful people who are now suddenly magically unlucky on proposition and never make it into power structures. It's the complacency of millions of bystanders that enables evil to perpetrate throughout the world. Secondly, let's talk about the punishment of bad acts. And the mechanism that we got again and again from their side of the house was on deterrence. Let's just consider this, and let's just gut check this. Hindus believe in karma, or at least I believe, and yet India has mass inequality. They literally have the caste system. They have huge amounts of violence towards women, huge amounts of discrimination against minority groups. This is like very, very clearly something that doesn't work. And we gave you structural reasons for them, countering their assertions that this is just somehow magically going to work. We told you that people are short-termists, that they prefer short-term gains over doing good and over the long-term increases in intangible luck that they may experience. And so bad things will still happen. But what was the flip that we told you? Which is that even if you punish everyone perfectly on their side of the house, this was an unjust punishment. That you might have done things under and conditions of circumstance that you might have had to steal bread to feed your family, that you might have acted irrationally out of anger or fear. Even if you were perfectly rational, we said that you still had a right to put yourself first, to act in your own self-interest, to protect yourself because you are the only person capable of doing so, to protect your family because you were in the best position to take care of them and you had a special obligation to the people closest to you. But then, we told you that there were better ways to become a better person, that there are ways to learn through things like interaction with other human beings or just experience from being on this earth. But we told you that karma and the way in which it specifically manifested built resentment in you. Finally, let's talk about our last pact of victory. We said that this was so powerful because it co-opted proposition's mechanism. If deterrence is so strong, people are even more anxious. They live worse lives under a culture of fear and uncertainty. We thought that this was a terrible life to live. We stand on the side of humanity. We're very proud to oppose.
Evil is not natural. Evil is not complacency. Every day we wake up and we decide to continue to be evil. Capitalism is not just a consequence of like decisions or material circumstance, right? Even if it is, there is a decision to be made to evolve capitalism to what it is now. When workers cry out saying they don't have enough wages to buy food, a decision was made to keep the wage low. When people are licking radium in watch factories and their mouth is literally collapsing because of radiation, a decision was made to keep that information hidden, not to the public, making these people continue to suffer. Complacency does not create evil. Complacency might perpetuate evil, but evil is always originating from evil decisions. And on our side of the debate, evil decisions are less likely to happen, right? Okay, so first clash is basically the incentive to be good. Our opponents basically raise the alternative of laws as an incentive to be good, right? But laws doesn't laws doesn't really push me to be good because laws are also very, very vague, right? Our opponents try to say that morals are vague, but so are laws. I don't know the entirety of the codex of law in Germany, right? That's why there are law students. That's why there are lawyers, right? But there's a general idea of what's good or bad, like killing is bad, like stealing is bad, right? Secondly, we say that in a karmic society, what's unique from law is there's this active incentive to actually do good, right? This links to our opponent's idea of atonement, which they say, I do bad things, I don't know the punishment, I'm likely to be more resentful. But in a karmic society where I know if my good actions are rewarded and my bad actions are punished, is there no more incentive when I do something bad and I get bad karma to actually work even harder to be good and atone for those actions so I gain back the karma, so I'm more karmic and more lucky, right? Failure to engagement, again, with the mechanism of our characterization, right? So there is more incentive to actually be good, to atone for bad things, and to gain back that karma, right? Thirdly is on risk. Our opponents mentioned this abstract idea of doing good things risk, me harming people. They give the idea of what if I give food to a person on the street and they get food poisoning? Here's an idea. How about you just buy good food and give it to this person? Why don't you just ask, do you have some allergy so I can give you food that doesn't kill you, right? It's not that hard to know if your action is going to have a bad consequence, especially if you do due diligence, right? We do not see a uniqueness on their side characterizing why this risk is so enigmatic, so big and so unsolvable that it depletes everyone's ability to do good. Secondly, right, basically. Okay, so thirdly, on structures, which is the single point that they did not refute, we talk about good leaders, right? Our opponents' points are basically all contingent on what if there's a bad person in power. However, we gave you so many mechanisms of why a bad person is less likely to be in power, right? Judge, imagine, they keep saying, okay, what if a leader is reckless? What if we only care about our short-term gains and we neglect our long-term gains? Well, if a leader in power is making these decisions, they're more likely to also make short-sighted decisions in real life, right? And if these short-sighted decisions lead to bad outcomes, their karma is likely to go down because they're doing bad things, right? And if their karma is going down, they're less likely to be in power, ergo, the luck mechanization we have characterized, right? So therefore, a person's behavior in their everyday life is likely a good reflection of how they will act as a person in power, right? And because so many people are motivated to be good, to consider more things, to act altruistically in daily life, we argue that in our world, leaders are more likely to reflect these values that we propose karmic values are likely going going to propose them, right? Lastly, our opponents talk about how the status quo allows us to have freedom, allows us to have all these things. The status quo is not good by any means, right? If people are truly altruistic and if law and legal order truly solves all our problems, why are millions of people still starving? Why are millions of people still poor? Why is there genocide in today's world? Why are people being deported, being hated on, being called less than human and animals, right? We tell you that only when cosmic justice is served can true freedom be found. And this is why you should vote for the prop. Thank you.